ultimately, our goal is to create these places, spaces that bring people from all walks of life together and be so uplifted that they reconnect with their sense of joy or sense of the sacred.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Devers, and this is Clever. Today, I'm talking to Lisa Donohoe and Brynn Gelbard of Londubh Studio. Londubh specializes in the creation of custom art, surface designs, wall coverings, and textiles for residential, commercial, hospitality, and experiential spaces. Founded in 2011 by Brynn and Lisa, two women dedicated to living life on the edge in full color and shimmer, whose art and surface designs are an unapologetic love letter to maximalism and glam. Londubh is a secret weapon of the design world, with some of the most notable names in the industry seeking them out for their pristine craftsmanship, unparalleled artistry, and boundless creativity. Londubh means blackbird in Gaelic and represents both the duo's love of nature and the iridescent, shimmery way in which they express nature in their work. Their hand-applied installations feature paints, glazes, decorative plasters, and metal leaf. Their portfolio includes everything from building facades to diving boards, large-scale murals to bathtubs, and every traditional surface imaginable. They've been showcased at serious design exhibitions like Salone del Mobile in Milan, and among other projects have recently completed several custom environments for a historic mansion in San Francisco with celebrated interior designer Nicole Hollis, and an installation for NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, interpreting satellite images in custom decorative plasters and gold and copper leaf. It's not surprising that NASA would seek them out. There's definitely something cosmic at play here. As you'll hear, they're translating love, magic, and the sacred through exquisite artistry and extreme technical proficiency into visual celebrations that vibrate with love and emanate joy. And whether you see their work on the side of a building, on Instagram, or hear about it here, you definitely feel it. Here's Brynn and Lisa.
My name is Brynn Gelbard. I currently live in Los Angeles, and I'm one half of Londubh Studio.
My name is Lisa Donohoe. I also live in Los Angeles, coincidentally, on the other half of Londubh Studio. Two halves make a whole, I hear.
Well, I love meeting you, and I can't wait to unpack the whole story of Londubh Studio. So let's go back to before you were a duo, when you were your own separate beings doing what you do as children. Like, where did you grow up, and how was your creativity manifesting?
I grew up in Ireland. I was born in Dublin, and I've always been an artist. Ever since I can remember, I was always painting, drawing, scribbling, doodling. Like all my copybooks throughout school were always just covered. It was just always my first form of self-expression. I did it without even thinking, oh, this is art, I'm creating art. It was just something that came out of me. And that hasn't really changed. The methods have changed over the years, but it's always been my first method of self-expression. And growing up in Ireland, I was really exposed to lots of history, art, architecture. You know, in school, one of my earliest memories in school, probably 6 or 7, going to see the Book of Kells. It's in the library in Trinity College. If you haven't been to see it, you have to go if you visit Dublin. It's like an illuminated manuscript from the 9th century.
Wow.
And it moved me so much, and there was so much detail, and it was done by hand by these monks. And I was just like, how is that even possible? And I feel like that was such a transformational moment for me as an artist, because I was like, wow, look what you can do if you put time and energy and effort into something. And
how old were you when you had that experience?
I was probably maybe 7 or 8, I think.
Wow.
Makes perfect sense.
I mean, growing up in Ireland, things like that are around all the time. There's so much history. Everything is so old there anyway, that you're just kind of just being around that. And it was good that our school used to bring us to places like that and really kind of immerse us in the culture and immerse us in the history and expose us to the art and all the amazing things that were created. Like, we'd also go to Newgrange, which is like a Neolithic shrine, kind of like Stonehenge, but it's filled in. It's like an earthen mound, and it's from 3200 BC, so it's like 5,000 years old. And there's like amazing carvings on the rock, megalithic art, like spirals and geometric patterns. And, you know, also going there on a school tour when I was probably maybe 9, and also being really inspired by that as well. And just like, wow, these people created this 5,000 years ago, like obviously a massive effort to put the big stones, and they got the stones in from like hundreds of miles away. Like, how did they do it? Kind of like in building the pyramids, like how did they manage to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of the decoration on it, carvings in the stones, you're like, it obviously meant something really important to them. The exact meanings have been lost over time, but I really felt them. I felt when I was there, the connection with just like, wow, somebody's communicating through this 5,000 years later, and I'm feeling it. I'm picking up on it. I don't know exactly what it is, but it moved me so much.
I'm happy you shared that story, and I want to maybe unpack that even a little bit more later, because I do think there is a kind of energy transmission that happens. It's from the artist to the page or whatever the media is, and it sort of stays embedded. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so moved by your work, is I like to really think about the energy and love and craft that you both put into the work, staying in the room with the work and really being part of the ambiance, not just visually, but energetically. And so I was really moved doing research about the both of you and just about the care that and the dynamic that you both have together. So we'll talk more about that later. But as a child, when you're having this kind of transcendent experience, when you're experiencing art and it's really sort of blowing the lid off the cathedral, are you supported in this? Like, is there backup from your family life in terms of appreciation of the arts and appreciation of your creativity?
I mean, yes. I mean, a lot of other family members are creative. My dad was a great artist. Both my older sisters, are both creatives. My grandfather on my mom's side was really creative as well. So it was kind of like, it was always encouraged, art, and like, that's your thing, and you can do whatever you want with that. There was always kind of an understanding there that if I wanted to pursue that path, that I would be supported, and that it was kind of like, yeah, go for it.
That's awesome.
It's amazing. And ultimately, I didn't decide to be an artist professionally till later in life, but it was just when the timing was right, the timing was right. But I never stopped. I was always creating through the whole time.
Brynn, what about you?
Really, words were my medium my whole childhood. Like, I was writing stories before I knew how to spell. So for me, learning to spell was such a relief, because then I could actually communicate with what I was writing. And so for me, writing and telling stories, that was always my thing from a really young age. And, you know, to be honest, I loved art in school, but I never, ever considered myself an artist. And I took like a sculpture class in college that I loved, and I took an architecture class in college that I loved. But as a kid, I never, like, to this day, I can't really draw anything. You know, a lot of the digital programs obviously give you a way to express yourself, but I never saw myself as an artist because I couldn't draw. And I tried and I tried, and I never could get perspective. And so often when I look at people doing various kinds of art to this day, I wonder what would have happened if I'd had someone come along and be like, no, go for it. You know,
Yeah.
My education growing up was so much more kind of get into a good college. I grew up on Long Island outside of New York City. And it was really so much more about like grades and sports and getting into a good school and having good extracurricular activities that would get you into the best school possible. And that was my childhood. I never really considered life as an artist. And it was really, honestly, by accident. You know, Lisa and I have been together for 22 years. It was really because of our love for creating together and realizing while making short films that we love to work together, that we ended up working together. But it was all really through kind of cosmic intervention than really both of us being artists and coming together.
Cosmic intervention is one of my favorite things. Okay, but I want to go back to this idea of you being a wordsmith and not identifying as creative, because I had the same situation. Like, I couldn't draw, and I ended up expressing myself through like music and haircuts and decorating my room all weird, And so I knew I had this latent creativity, but it wasn't typical creativity. And so therefore I didn't really identify with it. And I also have a thing for words. And I think words are creative. And I think also if you're a storyteller that you tell me, but do you think of yourself as a systems thinker?
It's funny that you say that, because that concept has been really prominent in our lives lately. And the truth of the matter is, I think Lisa and I exist so much outside of the box and beyond systems. And sometimes friends of ours who are like really tight with systems and have great systems and understand systems, we're like, oh, you get how things work and you can operate within systems, because our whole world essentially is systematic. You know what I mean? And I think for people like me and Lisa, we have a lot of knowledge and we understand what we have to do in order to create and make it work visually and, in terms of lasting. But do we have systems in place? As much as we need to, you know what I mean? But beyond that, we're really freewheeling, you know what I mean? And so I think there are just people who are meant to kind of butt up against boundaries when those boundaries aren't really needed. Because, sometimes systems are great. Sometimes systems make things more productive, but sometimes systems can be restrictive.
Yes.
And they don't need to exist. And so...
Or they were built for something else a long time ago and they're just still in place, but they need to be adapted and modified. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think as people, but also as queer artists, we follow our hearts. And that would be the greatest system that we operate within,
Did you always follow your hearts? Or did you have to learn?
I think the truth of the matter is both of us are inherently on the edge enough that to some extent we've always followed our hearts. Like, we've both always been really not like the popular kid or the kid that fit in. But, we've always been respected for how we did that. You know what I mean? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. And I think both, yes, following our hearts and also learning as you go along as well.
So when you say you weren't the popular kid, but you were respected for how you showed up on the edge, what did that look like for each of you?
I mean, I think for me, it was just like being myself, even though I wasn't really maybe very self-aware of what that was, or I was choosing to be myself or how I was perceived in the world. But looking back now, I was like, oh yeah, I was kind of out there on the edge. I don't know, people maybe just respected that and were like, oh, she's a little different or she's doing her own thing, but she's herself.
Lisa also happens to be one of the kindest, funniest people you'll ever meet, and just really easy to access for people from all walks of life.
Thank you. That does help for sure. And I do think people can sense when you're being authentic. You're not trying to fit in, but you're also not trying to not fit in for the sake of anything other than just being real.
Yeah.
At what point did your lives start to intersect? How did you meet?
Lisa was my server in a restaurant on January 27th, 2002.
In San Francisco.
Yeah, it was the restaurant she worked at was Chow on Market, and it was on Church at Market in the Castro. I had done my semester abroad in college in New Zealand, and I had a few friends from New Zealand visiting, staying on my couch. And I don't even remember how we ended up at Lisa's restaurant, but we ended up having to wait like 2 hours for a table. So by the time we got our table, the host of the restaurant, who to this day is a really good friend of ours, I remember him saying to me, I'm going to sit you in Lisa's section. And I remember when Lisa came over, and she came over with such swagger and she was so cute. And I just remember the first two words that went through my head were, oh shit.
Okay, now I want to hear the other side of the story. Lisa, what was that like for you?
So yeah, when I came out to say, it was like, he's like, I've just put a fun group in your section. I was like, great. And everyone was just so friendly and nice. And we were going around where everyone was from. And you were kind of shy. I mean, knowing you now, you were a little shy, but
when Lisa gave, at the end of our meal, when Lisa gave us free chocolate cake, I was like, that deal is sealed. That is just like straight
it was homemade flourless chocolate cake with vanilla bean ice cream and homemade chocolate sauce.
Okay. Okay, so the chocolate cake sealed the deal. And I'm guessing this is your romantic origin story, but the origin story of your creative dynamic is still yet to unfold, correct?
Yeah. So we got together in 2002 in San Francisco, and we ended up moving to LA in the end of 2009. So we didn't start Londubh until 2011. We did make a few short films, and, Lisa being creative, like when I was in San Francisco, I was working in like some small production houses, and sometimes we would go and work with this English filmmaker team in the UK, and Lisa worked in the art department while I worked in production. But then Lisa started getting into it, but she didn't have a driver's license. So she would start taking art department jobs, but I would have to take jobs as her assistant, because otherwise she had no way of getting there.
And then 10 days before we moved to LA, I got my license because Brynn was like, I don't mind driving around San Francisco. It's okay not to have a driver's license in San Francisco. It's kind of normal. But she's like, not LA, get your license. I was like, okay. And I did, barely.
Okay. Already, you guys are working well together.
Yes. And that was how we knew, from taking those projects, whether it was where she was taking art department jobs and I had to drive her, or her taking art department jobs for things that I was doing. And then we started making some kind of queer short films with friends that were in like the Frameline Film Festival and stuff like that. And we just really knew that we had a really great time together, and that, we'd always partied together when we were young. We had so much fun. And then it really started to translate into creating together, because, creative work is really like the partying of the work world, I think. When you really get to like mature your wild ways into something productive, which was why we left San Francisco ultimately to move to LA, was to really cement our growing up and shifting from wild, blowing off steam baby queers to making something of our lives.
How old are you when you decided you needed to make this move to LA?
I was 32 and Lisa was
36.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that is
time to grow up.
Yeah. But I'm glad you had the wild years too, because I feel like those sometimes don't get the credit they deserve for actually teaching you about life.
Agreed.
That was a piece of advice that someone gave me when the summer I was 20, I drove cross country and worked in the psych department of UCSD and stayed with my aunt's best friend from college. And she was a lawyer. And I remember being 20 and her putting like my first martini that I ever had down in front of me and telling me that I should make sure to spend my 20s really exploring and getting to know myself. And she's like, that's a time that you're never going to have back, that you can make all the mistakes you want. You can explore, you can be stupid and silly, and you can learn what ignites your heart. I think that's a really important piece of advice, especially in our society that has an education system that's so much about learn this, feed it back, learn this, feed it back, learn this. We don't really learn to explore and to really know who we are. We have to do that on our own. And so I think for us at the time that we ended up choosing to kind of grow up and evolve, it was perfectly right for us. I think one of the things about San Francisco and those times was, in the world that we hung out in San Francisco, it was, I would say, the underbelly of the queer world. So it was very diverse. Mm-hmm. It was very diverse in every term, whether it was gay, straight, trans, whatever, everyone under the sun. Let's just put it that way. People from all walks of life, all over the country, all over, beyond the country. And I think being in that realm of being around so many people and who accepted one another and who, some of our closest friends in that scene were also straight, and those people fit into that scene because nowhere else were they allowed to be that free. Mm. And I think that freedom and that interacting with people from so many walks of life and embracing curiosity as our greatest asset. You know what I mean? When you can learn to find things in common with people from whom in the conventional world you'd be seen as so different. And when you're in that realm where you're all kind of outcasted in some way, but you're not there to be sad about being outcasted, you're there to celebrate unity. Oh, we found this place where we can all find things in common and celebrate. And I think having that time period is so influential for us. It just makes us willing and comfortable with working with people from all walks of life and learning from people from all walks of life. And it makes us comfortable with evolving and changing. You know what I mean? I think being together for 22 years, people say to us, what is the thing that you would pass along to anyone? It's like, we all go through life and we're influenced and we grow and we change and we evolve, and let that be and celebrate that, and I think that's one of the greatest things for both of us, is that we have been together for 22 years and we're totally different people in a lot of ways than we were when we met.
Absolutely. And we've always allowed and encouraged each other to grow and change, and expected that and cheered that on completely.
So you're in the frame of mind that you want to be consciously intentional about how your life is going to evolve, and you want to mature your wild ways into a creative and professional practice. Moving to LA is one of the major steps in that. And what happens and what precipitates the founding of Londubh?
I think when we first got here, I started working in the art department through a recommendation from a friend, doing commercials and helping out in the art department. And I just was like, oh my God, I can't do this. This can't be my career, because it's not very creative and you're creating a lot of waste and everything's just temporary. And so it didn't feel right. So I wanted to do something else. I had worked for a decorative painting studio while I was in San Francisco, and worked there after I finished working in the restaurant. And I had trained there, apprentice and trained for like 5 years, I think, learned all the techniques. A lot of it was very traditional: gold leafing, plastering, glazing, painting. But every now and then we would have a job that wasn't traditional, that was more contemporary. And I was always excited about how you could take these old techniques and processes and make something completely new of them. So I think when it was clear that I didn't want to do the production work, I was like, I'll just start my own studio down here and just start it and see what happens. And at the same time of starting Londubh, I decided to do the interior design program at UCLA, because I figured all our clients are going to be interior designers, most of them, at least starting off. And just to look at the work holistically, to see what I would be creating and how that would fit into the broader scope of what they were doing, what the clients wanted, and not just me coming and going, well, I like this. And they're like, yeah, but it's not related to anything. To just kind of look at the whole process holistically. So I did that. And then not long after that, you jumped in to help. with Londubh. We had a project for doing these panels, silver-leafed panels for the windows for David Yurman on Rodeo Drive. And I was like, I need some help. And Brynn you were just finished some projects and you were looking to do for a little break.
That sounds like a pretty good job for just starting your studio. Did you have contacts or?
Actually, somebody through production got us that job. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Okay, so you needed help, and Brynn, you roped Brynn in to be your assistant again?
Yes, even though I could drive this time. I could drive. I had wheels. I was fully operational. But, you were looking to take a break from yours. And it just seemed
I had been traveling around the country. Lisa and I are obviously a binational same-sex couple, and leading to the Defense of Marriage Act and Prop 8 going to the Supreme Court, I was traveling around the country with an immigration lawyer who focused on protecting same-sex binational couples who couldn't get immigration rights because the Defense of Marriage Act specified that the U.S. government could only recognize opposite-sex couples for immigration purposes. So Lisa and I were really lucky because Lisa won a green card in the lottery, which is how she was able to be here. And as a karmic project, I just felt like, oh my God, the year before, I just wanted to make video portraits of people from all walks of life who had somehow become involved in the LGBTQ rights movement, just to kind of create a time capsule for down the road so that people would see all these people from all walks of life who were advocating for equality. And the year before these two cases went to the Supreme Court, an immigration lawyer reached out and he said, listen, I have a bunch of clients who want to tell their stories. They're all over the country. If I, cover your travels and stuff, will you travel with me and stay with these people and record their stories? And we'll write articles releasing the stories through the Huffington Post. And so the year before, when Lisa was still at the UCLA program, I was traveling all over from Colorado to Miami to New York to, all over to interview these couples. And so when Donohoe was struck down, that was when Lisa finished UCLA. And so the timing was perfect because I was just emotionally eradicated, if you will.
Oh God, I bet. That sounds so exhausting.
Just crazy heartbreaking hearing these people and their pure agony, not knowing whether or not they were coming out to share their story to sway public opinion. If it didn't work, their stories were out there and they were, you know what I mean? They were literally risking everything. So when I finished that project and Lisa needed help, and I knew how much fun I had working with Lisa, it was the perfect opportunity just to, it was like a heart cuddle right there. Just go and play and create and be with this person who I'm so lucky to have. And it was never supposed to be anything beyond a breather for me before getting back to my own work. And once again, the universe had other plans.
It was really obvious. It was really obvious from that first project that, okay, there's something else going on here. There's something else at play. There's a guiding force that's driving us together. And
what were the signs?
It just, everything that we touched creatively just kind of exploded.
Like this, you know what I mean? Lisa just starting to teach me, being okay, we're going to do projects together and you're going to learn making projects. I got to learn working with her, and her skill set is, I will say, biased or not, I would sit there before we started working together and watch her experiment with our materials and learn from pushing the boundaries once again, what was possible, what was not possible. So there I was getting the opportunity to learn from the best. And one of the things about writing screenplays is it takes so long. You don't finish and then it's finished and you get to see the complete picture.
No, you write the screenplay and then you have to shop it or.
And by the time anything happens, you don't necessarily recognize it. You know what I mean? And a lot of what I was doing, as a writer was co-writing. And, I feel like when it came time to work with Lisa and being able to start and finish and stand back and relish in the completed project, there was something so unbelievably satisfying. And it was this life that I wanted to live.
Yes, I hear you on that. And it's a very sort of tangible measure of your accomplishment for the day. It's also having a direct impact on the space. And then you're also in the space of the person that you love and admire. And so like, it's showing you a pretty clear picture of like, you could have this life.
Right. And we were kind of sharing a space at the time, the studio space. Your writing desk was kind of in front of the studio desk where I was doing the experiments, and always have leftover plaster from a job and just like, I wonder what would happen if we did this, or how can I do this, and just trying to push things. And then you would be there and you'd be like, that looks good. Or what would happen if you did? And there was just all these little inputs, and it became this kind of, I feel like me with my traditional skill set and the techniques that I learned, and then you with your kind of, I always call it your punk rock. Well, what would happen if we just did that, and thinking of something completely differently off the spectrum? And I was like, well, I don't know. Let's find out, because we're here experimenting. And I think that dynamic is what propels the studio.
That's beautiful, that dynamic. The one where you have the learned knowledge, the technical expertise, all of the sort of traditional knowledge that you've learned and practiced. And then the novice who's like coming from a very outsider perspective. You know what you like, and you maybe know what looks good, but you don't know the chemistry of the materials or what is considered doable by this sort of existing body of knowledge. So you're just like, let's poke holes in it. let's experiment. And it can yield some really interesting results, or at least put you down a path of really like innovative experimenting. And how nice that you appreciated that, because it can be wild.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ideas that you would have, I'd be like, I never would even think about that.
But I think there's something to be said about the balance in asking questions, and both of us being willing to receive, no, that's not possible, and here's why. Okay. Or, yeah, let me try that. Okay. Me not having the knowledge and Lisa having an incredible amount of knowledge. So it's really, the knowledge is important. Like there's that saying, like, in order to best break the rules, you need to know the rules. And I think there's very few people that I've come across in our industry who understand the rules of our materials as much as Lisa. Like if I ever can't find her, she's quite often broing with paint reps, you know what I mean? And really calling to understand, like, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And like really, and like getting their phone numbers and then being like, well, you want to use it for this? Like we very often, like one time we did a painted pool deck mural, and it had to be a material. This was an oceanside 70-foot long pool in Miami that needed to withstand the ocean, the chlorine, the iguanas that came and laid on it in the morning and peed and rolled around in it, all the different environmental stuff, UV, all of it. And it had to be, non-slip and all the things. Yeah. And I think one thing about us is that we have a C33 painting and decorating contractor's license. So we not only design things that are stylistically sound, but they're built to last in a given environment. And so that's something that Lisa decided to take on when she started the business, to really qualify herself and our company for the most grandiose and high-level projects. And so that when we contact Lisa, spent a long time, like, what products should I use? We don't use the same products on every job. We use the products that are right for that job. There's a lot of different products that we use, and a lot of decorative artists, they use their products and that's what they do, and great for them because it would make life so much easier.
Right, because each new product has a new learning curve associated with it. They have different, they behave differently, they cure differently, the color shows up differently.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of curious, like at the point when you take on this pool deck job, does the research begin? Do you say, yeah, and I'll figure it out? Or do you say, I'm not sure, let me do some research and then I'll come back to you if we can do it? Or is it a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both.
Bit of both.
If it's something that's not like a pool deck in that environment is very extreme. So that was like, I think we can do it, but let's check and let's figure it out. And we just figure it out. You just need to put in the time and effort into doing the R&D. And if it turns out that we couldn't, we'd always be honest and say, actually, we thought we could do this and we can't. We did a project for Jamie Bush, the Butterfly House in Carmel, which is gorgeous. Yes. It's one of the most gorgeous jobs we've ever worked on.
He was on the show and he talked about that house. Yeah,
he's great. And when we first met with him, he was like, well, obviously the durability is a concern being right next to the ocean. And I was like, well, we just finished a job doing the facade of Clifton's downtown. And that's, and he was like, okay, I'm going to go by and take a look. And he went by and took a look and we talked more about that. And he was like, okay, you've kind of proved yourself. I know you're going to be good to do this, so I don't have to worry. So that was good.
I mean, I think we were always like, we'll take on any surface that will stay still long enough for us to do our thing. I think we were always happy to just bite the bullet and figure it out. And I think part of that ballsiness is the two of us working together and egging each other on constantly.
What does that mean, though? Are you sometimes in physically precarious situations, or do you sometimes have to, I don't know, rigging to hang on the side of a building?
Well, we said yes to our first 5-story mural, and we were both terrified of heights. And I was like, no, we can do it. And then on the day we went up, when they put the scaffolding in to test it, there was like steps built to the side of the building. So it kind of nudged the scaffolding out slightly. So on the first floor, it was maybe, 6 or 7 inches away from the building. But when you get up to the 5th floor, it was like 18 inches.
Oh my God.
So we went home that day and I was like, I'm going to have to call the client and say, we can't do the 5 stories, that we just don't have the nerve. And then the pattern that we were doing was our We Are the Hearts pattern. And it's about love being the building block of life. And if you use love as your building blocks, how your life can change and grow and evolve. And we were doing it in this massive surface. And so even though we were afraid, we thought, okay, our fear, our desire to put that love out into the world is greater than the fear of heights. And so it wasn't that much greater. It was only about that much greater, but still it was enough. And we just thought, no, we have this opportunity. We have to do it.
That's a beautiful story. Yeah. If love is the building blocks of life, then fear doesn't really win. It can still show up, but it can't win.
Yeah.
That's what we stand for right there.
You both you're an inspiration. Well, it does sound like this work is constantly challenging you in ways to continue growing and evolving.
It is really, and it's a couple of years ago, we did a project in San Francisco for the designer Nicole Hollis, who to us is exemplary in our field for a team that is so supportive and so knowledgeable and so empowering of us as artists, but, and all the artists that we know who get to work with that team. And, Nicole's like, you guys are the experts, you tell me. I think that experience working on that historical mansion project for her, it redefined our sense of selves as artists, first and foremost. When we finished that project, it became not what else are we necessarily going to do in our creative realm of interior design and architecture. But it really, although we always did murals, it really became like we could put our patterns on any surface. We could think in so many new ways. And so we started taking the basic step of, wallpaper and stuff to make our work more available to people. But then we were like, how else can we create? What else can we do?
Isn't that amazing when you have somebody who believes in you enough that they're going to invest in you? It's like wind in your sails. It really does lift the whole project up. And I'm excited to hear it also changed the way you thought of yourselves in terms of your creative output. You know, those wall coverings they're exciting because it feels a little more accessible. And it also feels like an offering, like it's a way of giving your gift to more people.
We hear a lot from clients, whether it be a client whose ceiling that we did 2,000 hour long gold leaf fluorescent and acrylic paint, all done by hand, to clients who have wallpaper, how uplifting the patterns and the designs are to be around. Every time we do public art, people come out of the woodwork to tell us, oh my God, I love seeing this. I just love it.
I live across the street. As soon as you put the gold on, I was just like so happy looking at my window, and they come by every day to give you their opinion on how you're doing.
You know, and the purpose for us is like when we hear that our stuff is uplifting, again, coming back to this place of being around people from all walks of life and finding joy together, finding common ground. Ultimately, our goal is to create these places, spaces, whatnot, that bring people from all walks of life together and have them be so humbled or so uplifted that they reconnect with their sense of joy or sense of hope or sense of the sacred, and life becomes better, hopeful, all those things, you know? So for us, it really is about having stuff that can be accessible.
And also the patterns for the wallpaper. It's kind of the first time where we did things just for ourselves. We weren't designing within any architectural constraints or within any designer's aesthetic or any client's needs. It was just us, ourselves. And so that was really exciting. And we just kind of let ourselves go a bit wild with that. And that was a lot of fun. And it's interesting, like if we're looking at our Peacock designer, Peacock Nouveau, like I look at that and I can see like elements of the Book of Kells, like to go way back when I started it. And I'm just like, oh, wow, it wasn't consciously put in there, but when it was printed, when we went to the printer the first time to see them, I was like, oh my God, it feels a bit like the Book of Kells. And it just was just like a full circle moment for me personally.
I believe it. And when Brynn was describing this way of sharing the uplifting with as many people as possible, I was taken back to that moment when you saw the Book of Kells and you had that transformational moment. And like, this is your way to transmit this. And I mean, I think about the power of that book from, you said, how many years old was it?
I think it was around 800.
800. Yeah, that's one book, but so much care was put into it that it's been preserved and regarded with reverence. And that is imprinted on your psyche. And this is the modern manifestation of wanting people to have a similar feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes me feel something. That's powerful. I do think we do art and design a disservice when we forget the sacred and the reverent part of it. When the care and craft is baked into it, and when it's in the DNA of it, it has the power to exude that and to influence people's energy, and to do that in a positive way or a provocative way, even to help shift perspective, it's important. It's meaningful. It's real. And I hope that you get to savor this aspect of your life and feel good and sleep well at night. There's a lot of joy I'm hearing, and I appreciate it's labor still. It's a lot of labor. So that comes with a lot of, like, it's hard on your body, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's a lot of research. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of time it does feel like that you're both like very committed to the calling at this growth edge that you're at right now. Like, what's the pain? What are you leaning into that needs to be the knot that needs to be worked out?
I think the pain is very often having to like make people unlearn what they've learned on social media.
Oh, preach.
And we see things where it's like, we were interviewed for an article once about someone painting tiles. And we were like, we won't answer your question because what you're asking is not possible. And we as artists, we guarantee our work. And so we're going to say no if adhesion is an issue.
Yeah.
You cannot paint a toilet seat no matter what. Toilet seats, nothing will stick to them. You know what I mean?
For good reason.
Yes.
And I think one of the greatest pains beside the physical pain of looking up, looking down, bending over,
Floors, your knees.
my hands sometimes are like so tired. But sometimes that pain is when you're looking on Instagram and you're looking at an influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers talking about, look what I did today. And you're like, no, you did not. Like, that's not possible. You know what I mean? And so it's that pain of letting it be. It's that pain of seeing it and the lesson of letting it be, and staying focused on the authenticity and the legitimacy of what we do. It's the pain of, say, a interior designer who's been a production designer all along, who asks us to do something and we're like, it's not possible. And that production designer turned interior designer says, but in this Chris Brown video I shot, and it's like, you're shooting a video for a set that lasts a day, and then you're asking about a commercial space. You know what I mean? So a lot of the time it's like the pain is kind of the frustration when people won't communicate, because all that we need in order to do our best work is people who are like, I'm down to talk and communicate.
Yeah.
Whether it be about budget or scope or whatnot, we're these people we're like an ultimate treasure chest. We'll custom color. We'll work for a budget. We'll scale. We'll work with different materials. And the pain, I think, ultimately is how many people are afraid to have a conversation and figure it out. And I think that's just a general thing in society right now that we're seeing manifest a lot of times. But in our little world here,
mm-hmm.
It's just, when people are willing to have a conversation,
yeah,
there's so much that can be figured out.
Well, a conversation where they're willing to learn and maybe consider making adjustments to their design or their vision in the process with more information.
Yeah. And I think working with Nicole, I think, and her team, they were so kind of secure in what they do well, that they were well able to have the conversations, not just with us, but with all of the other creatives on the job, because we worked on that project for like 8.5 months. So we heard all the conversations with the other creatives, with the woodworkers, the tile guys, stone people. And the conversation was always, yeah, I know this was the plan, but it would look better if we did it this way. And they were totally open to hearing that. Or what would you suggest in your skill set with your knowledge? And it's just that it always ends up with the best result, because they were able to have those conversations secure enough to be like, okay, I don't know everything. This is your area of expertise. Talk to me and I'll listen and we'll make a decision, and it was just so inspiring. It was only kind of when we were around that, you kind of realize like, oh yeah, a lot of other projects are not like that. And how much of a shame that is, because it always improves the final result.
It does. And I think it also does wonders for dissolving this imaginary silo or this imaginary boundary between creatives and tradespeople, which I think is completely doing a disservice to all of the whole built world.
Majorly. To be honest, so much of the emphasis now is placed on the designer I don't want to take away from how they are choreographing and taking all these elements and putting them together. But there are people right now who are doing work that is so unbelievable. And their skill sets are mind-boggling. And they have studied for years and they have learned from masters. And that is something that just doesn't always get the credence. Like people in our industry are like want to hide their resources and
yeah. I don't think that's healthy for the overall ecosystem of the industry. And I don't think that elevates other people's game. And I think I'm with you there. I find that really reprehensible.
It's like if a film credit came up and it was like the director and the cinematographer and that's it. You know what I mean? But all these other people have brought their real unbelievable expertise to the table. And that project wouldn't be that project without it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I will say, like, those designers and design photographers who are willing to share the credit for what they created tend to be the most knowledgeable. They tend to be the most rooted in their knowledge.
That makes perfect sense. And I do think that I feel you on the pain of having to re-educate people after they've been fed like sort of inaccurate information on social media, which always makes it seem like things are doable that are not because they don't investigate the durability or the adhesion quality. I think conversations like this are the counterbalance. I like to think that we're putting out into the world a kind of antidote to that kind of media.
You are.
I hope.
I mean, I think for us and for all artists, just recognizing that the pains are the growth, and I think one of the things about us that we're so lucky is that we have each other to kind of push each other and support one another. And I think as a result of having that, we also have a circle of people who know that they can always come to us, because being an artist, even if you work on your own, it's still, you need other people to kind of go back and forth with, even if it's just about the loneliness of working on a project for X amount of time or the frustration. I think that's the most important thing, is having a network of people who support one another and who understand that there's enough success for everyone. We're all doing different stuff. We're all doing unique stuff. And so really and truly, a project that's really meant for you and you alone is not going to pass you by. And just embracing the community of it.
Have you been able to build, you spoke of the community that you had in San Francisco during the wild years and how important that was to your own like individual identity and development and freedom and igniting your heart. Have you been able to build the same necessary community in the artistic space? Or is it still in the making?
I do think that there's a community of people within the design world in LA. I think it's been less since the pandemic. I don't think it's really come back. And I also think that there's not enough of like a overarching infrastructure bringing people together. This all being said, I think we are really doing more of the public art and doing more of the art side of things. And, so being around different artists lately and seeing people just staunchly producing work, and getting work out there has been so inspiring. We had the amazing fortune this summer of becoming friends with this artist, Zanelle Mahale, and just seeing them work and seeing them create and seeing their persistence at putting out work.
Yeah.
We just got back from the royal wedding in Norway and meeting other artists who are just putting out work and just putting it out and just doing it for the love of it. It's something that I think Lisa and I did so much in the beginning and then got so wrapped up in our client work that we stopped making art for the joy of it. And we're just about to move to a new space in the Arts District, and we're so excited. And we're just honestly so excited to go creatively like unhinged.
I can't wait.
Just to get back to the pure joy of it and take all these lessons that we've discussed now, that we've learned over the last few years. And, we're putting out new wallpaper, we're putting out new fabrics, we're putting our, designs on anything. And so I think just going for it and having that community to encourage you, just being around, people who understand we're not just creating shapes and putting them together for the sake of it. We're not working with colors and light because we like it aesthetically. It's all very intentional, and there's a reason that it makes people feel good. And it's because that's the energy that we put into the work intentionally. And when people are specific with us about what they want in the work, then that gives us all the more opportunity to create even more intentionally. And often when we are creating for people, just channeling their essence, we've had multiple experiences where people have been shocked by the stuff that we've generated, that stuff that they've been thinking about that we would have had no way of knowing.
Whoa.
Yeah. And there's specific stories about that. I think we were doing a project for House of Honey once, who is another designer who's just kind of doing things differently, doing beautiful work, and very supportive of us, a really understanding of what we bring to the table. And one of her clients wanted a snake mural across her ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
And as we sat down to do the sketches, or to kind of get in the mood to start creating, it was like, we've never done a snake mural. We don't really do representational designs that often. Sometimes I came up with this idea of this two-headed snake, but it wasn't like, it was like a head at each end of the snake. I don't know where it came from. It was just like, okay, just sketching it out. And then I did some research, and it was like, because I wanted to make sure it wasn't like a bad omen or something.
Yeah.
And so I was doing research, and it was like, in ancient times, it was known as a protective talisman for pregnant women. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then when we presented the design to House of Honey, they were like, we mentioned that, and she was like, we didn't tell you the client was pregnant. And she was like 8.5 months pregnant. And we were like, okay, well.
And then it was really interesting because
wow,
we were doing this job, and we decided as a gift, because we really liked the client, she was very cool, and we met her mother and her husband or partner, I don't remember. They were just so cool. So we decided as a gift to gold leaf the eyes of the snake, both sets of eyes, as a gift, as a wish for her to have like golden vision, clarity of vision as she's a writer. And we didn't tell anyone until the day that we presented it. And when we were leaving, the client, who was like literally about to pop, she started crying, and she was covered in tattoos, and she pulled up her arm, and she had a snake on her arm. And she's like, you see the kind of sparkle in the eye. She's like, the sparkle in the eyes of the snake was because they were supposed to be like gold for golden vision, just like exactly like you said. And she was like, I literally can't believe you did that and said that. So things like that happen pretty often. And so when we have the opportunity to really communicate with designers and communicate with clients, there's so much magic that's possible beyond just getting something that's...
And we always let that magic in.
Yeah.
That is also real artistry, is knowing that magic is afoot and leaving the door open for it, and then allowing it to come through you without resistance or suspicion, but kind of just trusting the magic. That's really powerful and has the power, I think, to be a supportive energy in the world to the clients, but also therapeutic, and a joyful one. I have so enjoyed talking to both of you. You are magic beings, and I really love what you do, and I appreciate you sharing your stories. And your work is so technically sound, but also it's alchemy in some ways, and that's really beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us on, taking the time, asking such thoughtful questions, and really, it's just been amazing.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Hey, thanks so much for listening. For a transcript of this episode and more about Lisa and Brynn, including links and images of their work, head to our website, cleverpodcast.com. While you're there, check out our resources page for books, info, and special offers from our guests, partners, and sponsors. And sign up for our free Substack newsletter, which includes news, announcements, and a bonus Q&A from our guests. If you like Clever, we could really use your support. You can share Clever with your friends, leave us a 5-star rating or a kind review, support our sponsors, and definitely hit the follow or subscribe button in your podcast app so that our new episodes will turn up in your feed. We love to hear from you on LinkedIn, Instagram, and X. You can find us at Clever Podcast, and you can find me at Amy Devers. Clever is hosted and produced by me, Amy Devers, with editing by Mark Zurowinski, production assistance from Alana Nevins and Anushka Stefan, and music by L1011. Clever is a proud member of the Surround Podcast Network. Visit surroundpodcasts.com to discover more of the architecture and design industry's premier shows.
Creative work is really like the partying of the work world, I think.